Hi, everybody again, and welcome to the International Workshop on Environment, Sustainability, and Education. I'm Oren Pizmoni-Levy from the Center for Sustainable Futures at Teachers College, Columbia University, New York. And together with my partner in crime, Daphna Gan from the Israeli Institute of Education for Sustainability at the Kibbutzim College, we are happy to welcome you for the third season of this workshop. In a couple of minutes, I'll introduce the speaker for today, but I just wanted to give you, together with Daphna, a couple of introduction, comments, and background about the workshop. So the workshop started out of a necessity or some kind of a social need in the spring of 2020, when the first lockdown started in Israel and in the US. And we were really looking for a space where scholars can meet and continue the conversation about sustainability, education, climate change, etc., if conferences are not going to happen. So we started very small with just bringing together our friends from the two institutions and the students that we had at that time. And over the past 3 years, this endeavor really grew to something that we didn't expect it will be like that. We have now a listserv with more than 1,500 people from 20 different countries. People are joining us live, as you all did this morning or evening. And we have hundreds of people watching our recording online. So we are very happy to continue this workshop for a third season. We are trying to curate content that will speak to our interests and your interests. And at this point, I'm going to ask people, especially because we are in a very small group this morning, if people can just use the chat box to introduce themselves, say something like, hi, my name is, and I'm from, and where you're calling from. So we'll see who is at the call. And then the second round of questions will be to collect from you ideas for topics or themes you would like us to find speakers to speak about in the coming sessions. We have a speaker for today, and we have a speaker for November, but we have a lot of open slots for the spring, and we just want to collect some ideas from you. So let's start with a quick introduction round in the chat box, and then we'll collect some ideas. So we have Andy from London, co-convener of the Nissan project. Gareth, hey Gareth, you're in New York, that's wonderful. Neta from the Kibbutzim College in Israel. Caroline, a student at TC. Of course, Daphna, Virginia, who is joining us again and again from Maryland. Tali works for the EPA. Would love to hear about that, Tali. Sheila from Taiwan, Ronnie from New Jersey. Wonderful. And of course, our speaker, Athanasia. Okay, so now that we know each other, wonderful. Please use the chat box to write to us any kind of theme or topic or idea or even a speaker you would like us to try and bring to the session. I'm asking also if you can mute yourself so we won't have any background noise. That would be great. Let's use the chat box to collect a couple of ideas.
One, can you make me a co-host?
Of course.
Thank you.
Here we go. Hey, Marta from Argentina. So any ideas, please don't be shy. We are trying to collect these ideas. Thank you so much. Ronnie, what is EB? What is EB stands for? And thank you, Virginia, for the suggestion of indigenous scholars, especially from Brazil. And thank you, Garrett, for the idea of bringing someone from the fossil fuel industry. And thank you, Ronnie, for clarifying. Okay, this is great. This is very useful for us, and we'll try to work on that. Please keep the ideas coming in the chat box. And in the meantime, Daphne, anything else for introduction, or are we good?
I just want to add that we are thinking all the time if it's still necessary, these meetings, and we find out that the impact is much larger than we think. So we continue this year, and we hope that it will get to interesting direction. This is what I have to add.
Great, that's true. We keep hearing about the impact of this workshop and the recording from different people, so that's why we keep doing it. And we also enjoy seeing people every month to hear different ideas, so that's a good comment. Okay, so one of the things we are adding this year per request from different participants is a certificate of participation signed by both institutions. So if you need this for your professional development or any kind of requirements from your institution, please let us know, and we are more than happy to produce a certificate if you participated in one of the live sessions. Unfortunately, we won't be able to do it for someone that is viewing the recording after the fact. So if you have any questions about the certificate or you need anything from us, just let us know. We're more than happy to do that. As we already told you, we are interested we are looking for speakers for the next rounds of meetings. You provided us with a couple of ideas, and we'll work on that for October. We already secured the speaker for November and December. But if you're interested yourself to present, just let us know. We're more than happy to schedule a talk with you. Which brings me to the talk of today. Today, I'm very happy to have Athanasia Hatzifotiu.
Yes.
Okay, I was close. Who is a regular participant in our sessions for almost 2 years and always asking great questions. And we approached you last meeting and see if you will be interested in presenting your work. And you said yes, and we are very, very happy about that. The title of her talk today is Who is the Guardian of the Sea? A narrative practice approach analysis of a short story book for 6 to 8 years old on the main characters, environmental identity construction. And I'm really excited to hear your talk today, especially because it speaks to other themes that we had last year, especially the talk by Neta, who joined us today. Athanasia has gained her PhD from Durham University in the UK. She examined primary school teachers' knowledge and awareness of environmental education in 2 European countries, namely England and Greece. Her subsequent work addressed issues concerning the status of education for sustainable development in the national curriculum and in policy documents in these countries. She teaches at Sutherland University in the UK, where she is a senior lecturer in the Department of Social Science, Faculty of Education and Society. We are really excited to have you today. I'm going to stop sharing so you can start your screen sharing.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Oren. And let me share my screen now. Okay, here. Okay. So I guess you can see the presentation, and I cannot see anyone. So as I said before, it's a bit strange that I'm talking into my slides, but thank you once more for the invitation. And as Oren said, today's presentation is on The Guardian of the Sea, a narrative practice approach analysis of a short story book for 6 to 8 years old on the main character's environmental identity construction. Now, this project was also as a result of the lockdown, when we went to lockdown and the only outing was the supermarket effectively. This is how that particular storybook sort of caught my eye. So in this storybook that I'm going to talk about today, the storybook presents a fictional character that decides to act decisively in favor of an environmental cause. And the focus of the analysis is on the way that the narrative has been used and has constructed the main character's environmental identity in order to become the guardian of the sea. So I'm going to be examining this short story book in terms of the content and the language, and using the positioning analysis as well to highlight how the message around how the environmental message is communicated and how it has an impact upon a potential impact upon the environmental identity of the character, and by implication of the audience as well. Now, the book itself, it's quite colorful. The title, Ella Saves the Oceans, is in capital letters. Ella is in big green letters. Saves the Oceans is in red letters. And actually, even the way that the title is presented, it sort of communicates implicitly or even explicitly, someone might argue, an SOS emergency message about our oceans. Now, this particular book as well, story book, can be found with different names. So the one that I got hold of had the name Ella Saves the Oceans, but you can find it with Fred Saves the Oceans, Freddie, Theo saves the ocean. So it aims to speak on a kind of personal level to the young child. Now, I'm not gonna, I don't have any, as I mentioned before, this is the product of a lockdown, so there wasn't any particular kind of systematic approach to my sampling. Why this story and not another story? And I have to say that when I saw the booklet, Ella Saves the Oceans, it sort of automatically brought into my mind Greta Thunberg. Greta saves the world. At the time, if you remember, she was, and she still is, fighting for climate. So it sort of made me think, we have another child that is trying to save the ocean, and at the same time, in real life, we had Greta doing that on another level. So, reflecting on all this, two questions were formed while looking into these issues, as I said before. And the first one relates to what kind of environmental identity a storybook like this can promote. And the second one, whether a storybook can be considered as a proxy of a formative childhood experience in relation to the environment. So at the very end, I will address briefly these two questions as well. So environmental identity. The topic of identity is quite complex, is quite a big issue. Environmental identity as well is a multifaceted entity that rests upon all sorts of different aspects, is not a one factor thing. All sorts of formal, informal, personal, educational experiences in nature, all these things actually do contribute to galvanize and help people and young people develop their identities and their environmental identities in particular. different researchers like Clayton and Opoto and Payne have highlighted the importance of the social aspect as a factor that contributes to the development of environmental identity. Now, there are all sorts of research studies like the ones by Palmer, by Chawla, who investigated significant formative experiences in childhood that people later on identified as environmentally active, had identified as pivotal in their lives for defining their environmental identity and henceforth their environmental activism and activities they did. But it's also important to move further from the experiences in nature, which are extremely important. There's no denying about that on the formation of environmental identity, and see the social aspect. Something that Stapleton, for instance, argued that we don't have many studies that really go into the detail of how this societal context does impact upon environmental identities. Other researchers like Wainwright, for instance, in her work about the transformative power of images, words, and stories in reading biblical texts ecologically, argues that ecological reading that aims to develop ecological thinking needs to be seen as a process. And this is what she calls praxis. That is, just reading a storybook cannot transform someone's environmental, cannot galvanize someone's environmental identity. It takes a lot more than just reading something. So if we're thinking that environmental identity rests upon cognitive, affective, experiential aspects, the story and its content and its plot can address the cognitive aspect, but in order to help promote young children's, people's environmental identity, it needs to do a lot more. It needs to combine the reading with acting, with debating, with discussing, being, and hopefully all this, as Wainwright calls praxis, can help towards achieving ecological thinking that can also help promote positive environmental identities, and as well further on pro-environmental behaviors. All these things are in quite close connection to each other. So researchers like Tugurian and Carrier argued as well that we don't know much about environmental identity in the preteen years. So this particular storybook that I have is for the 6 to 8 years old. So in that respect, it was something that I feel it sort of, in a very minimal way, addresses this gap that exists in the literature about environmental identity features in early, well, 6 to 7 is not early years, but in earlier than the teen years at least. So just a little bit about the social aspect and the societal context that we just said that it is important to be taken into consideration when we're thinking the environmental identity construction, but as I said, not necessarily very clearly researched and understood right now. So what we mean by the social aspect is the context that helps people, that actually helps people develop their environmental identity and relates to how others view us and how we see ourselves in this particular context. And this is something that I think it goes for any kind of feature of our identities, not only the environmental identity, how we see ourselves in the context we are and how others view us are very strong influences upon our identity features. So it is fair to claim that today children live in a society that has highlighted the significance of environmental issues and problems quite a lot. It's the rhetoric around environmental issues, positive, negative, are well popularized, even though environmental education or education for sustainability is not necessarily, in most of the countries, Western countries, does not necessarily have a statutory firm position in the national curricula. I think through the different sessions we had in these seminars as well, we know that teachers, practitioners are doing a lot when it comes to the environment. So it's really important to have that as a background, that we live in a context that environment has been highlighted as important, and these are the messages that children hopefully already receive from all sorts of different directions: school, home, TV, the context. Tugurian and Carrier had an interesting study. They investigated how children's environmental identity relate to their educational experience. So they took what they thought made the environmental identity of fifth graders, and they wanted to see how these environmental experiences, ideas the fifth graders had relate to the way they were being taught in school science, the subjects of science. And they found that children's pupils' experiences were not taken into consideration at all. So in a sense, it was like two separate things. On the one hand, the children had their own experiences about nature from their own lives, but this was not necessarily brought into the formal educational context via the science of subject. They also found that the experiences that the children had in the natural world, and particularly experiences accompanied with positive feelings attached to them, like being comforted, relaxed, free, etc., were quite central to their sense, to the children's sense of environmental identity. But as I said before, these were not taken into consideration within the school context. And again, that would be that could have been a very good example where the social aspect, the societal context, could be seen as mediating a rather the formal educational experience that can be seen to be a bit more, dry, maybe, into inverted commas. So that could have been, as I say here, a notion of a missed opportunity that could help promote most and best children's environmental identity. So the question now is whether, this association between an experience in nature and the positive feelings developed can potentially be replicated when children are engaged in reading stories with environmental topics, not necessarily, the science textbook that they have in front of them in the formal educational context, but reading stories. Books like Ella Saves the Oceans, with their colorful and upbeat tone, can actually engage readers in all these in all sorts of social activities, like cleaning beaches, for instance, and in debating about the issues that are presented. Should we use plastic, for instance? Can we afford not to use plastic objects, etc.? So all this about the notion of praxis that Wainwright has talked before. So this way, children will have the opportunity to move beyond the dry knowledge information that they are being given, but they will be able to mediate the story with activities, with debates, with discussions that can help them and lead them to more conscious decisions about features around the environment, and move away from the sort of dogmatic-like manner when it comes to issues like to messages like, you know, the environment is important and you need to protect it. So it can further develop a much bigger dialogue around these issues that sometimes we seem to be taken as axioms, especially when they come from textbooks, educational school textbooks. And this can help address issues that other scholars like Echterling pointed and argued, that children's books on environmental issues seem to be oversimplified and depoliticized. Now, this is another issue altogether. It ties with what I'm discussing here, but you know, it's much bigger than this presentation here. So when it comes to Ella Saves the Oceans, a short story for 6 to 8 years old, that can be argued belongs to the category of the eco-edutainment books, where attention has been paid both to the content of the book as entertaining and as informative about oceans, and informative in terms of helping pupils become empowered to act. And that's quite now that's something that moves beyond the environmental identity. There are studies that have shown that if you have a strong environmental identity, is a very good predictor of pro-environmental behavior and action as well. Edeland and Malmberg also argued that the transformation of complex environmental issues and global justice into everyday actions is seen as a way of empowering children. So again, bringing the cognitive, and the experiential into sort of one line and effective in order to help children's environmental identity. And also Friston and O'Toole identified that there is a research gap on the influence of fictional stories upon children's pro-environmental behavior. So the methodology in terms of this particular project and the methodology used is the narrative analysis. It's within the qualitative methodology, using positioning as an analytic as a framework of analysis. Now, the narrative practice approach is a methodology that aims to bring together approaches of narrative analysis that researchers have already been using, like, for instance, the thematic, the structural, and interactional approach. Thematic, the one that tries to identify patterns in the story. Structural, the approach that the analysis that tries to identify the constituent parts of a story, the setting, resolution, complication, etc. The interactional approach relates to how meanings develop between interlocutors and how the plot develops. And there is a fourth approach that has been termed positioning analysis, the one that I've been using in this project as well, which is similar to the interactional approach, and is taking place in 3 levels. The first level refers to the way narrators position their characters vis-a-vis one another. The second level refers to the way narrators position themselves vis-a-vis the audience. And the third level refers to the way the narrators position themselves vis-a-vis dominant discourses. And as a result, researchers look into ways of how we make sense of who we are or the character in this book, in this storybook, makes sense of who they are in the particular context they are. Bamberg actually offered researchers three different kind of excuse me, different levels that this analysis that researchers can do this analysis, and these three different elements are sameness and difference, which describe the way the narrator shows how the characters of the story relate to each other and how much similar or different they are to each other. Then we have agency and passivity, which refer to the way that the characters develop their agency and passivity in relation to two directions. One direction that comes from the world to the person, and the other from the person to the world. And then lastly, continuity and change is the space where narrators can show the constant nature of development of the character into a new persona. So this is the analysis that I've used for this project. So now I'm going to go into the findings and discussion. I'm going to briefly mention the themes, and then I'm going to focus on the positioning analysis of certain particularly the main character, as we have some time constraints as well. So the basic themes from the story book have to do with plastic, marine pollution. The other one is the human element, and then the personified sea creatures. So when it came to the plastic and marine pollution, there were 12 statements that were negative when it came to the way plastic was presented. So things like plastic poisons our planet, the dolphins are caught up in a net, they cannot swim, every minute 1 rubbish truck of plastic is dumped into our oceans, etc. And there was one positive statement when talking about the plastic that referred to it as awesome stuff, and it is referred to it when objects, the images in the booklet had the objects of toothbrush, containers, everyday stuff that is we use all the time. So from a positioning analysis perspective, the narrator communicates that plastic pollution is a struggle that needs to be fought, while the usefulness of plastic is positioned in the past. So here we have this interesting binary where plastic was good, plastic is not good now. It was good when it was invented, but it's not good anymore. Now, this is an interesting, that would be a good example to further explore in a classroom in terms of debates, in terms of experiences. And I mean, what do you do if you don't use the plastic toothbrush that you have, for instance? And a current dominant discourse about the severity of an environmental problem, the plastic and marine pollution, again, is enhanced and communicated to children. So we live in a context, in a society that, as I said before, such environmental messages have already been sent, received as well, and it is further communicated in this story. So the message provides children with knowledge about the harmful impact of plastic. So when it comes to the human element, as I said, I will focus mostly on Ella, the main character. Ella asks and finds out that plastic is poisoning our planet, and we need to wage a war on waste. Now, these statements are quite strong. They insinuate an urgency and an immediacy of the problem that we have at hand, and position the character, Ella, as a warrior. Now, the warrior usually have to face enemies. And again, here it's reflected another binary positioning where environmental problems and humans are presented as two parts where their intersection is one of confrontation. So it's not one within the other, it's two different things. again, such confrontations are well documented in mainstream media. In another example, the narrator says, put on that suit and grab your mask. We really must make haste. The narrator extends here this needed war and action to include both the main character of the story and the audience. Here we see we. It's all of us that we need to be to make haste. You can lead the change, Ella. It's your time to be brave. Be the guardian of the seas and save the rolling waves. Now, here we see that it's introduced the notion of bravery, be brave, which again shows that this fight against marine pollution is difficult, is unnecessary. However, it's not really clear why it is difficult. Why do I have to be brave? Brave against my toothbrush? It's not very clear why the character needs to be brave, but the way that the language is used, the way that it's trying to encourage and empower children is mostly on the affective domain. Come on, you can do it. You can save the planet. The plastic thrown away 4 times. I'm sorry, I cannot see because I have all the stuff. I don't know how I can get rid of the Zoom stuff there, and I cannot read exactly the quote. Or every minute, 1 rubbish truck of plastic is thrown into our oceans. Here, we see how the narrator keeps on giving all this information about the harmful nature of plastic and what it does to the oceans. But interestingly enough, it uses the passive voice to communicate, this information and describe what is happening without clearly attributing the responsibility to humans. So yes, it is a problem. Yes, it's happening, but we don't articulate that this is something that is happening because of what humans do. Almost half of the rubbish in the oceans is left behind by fishermen. This is the first time where one particular group is identified as responsible for some of this mess. And the role of the fishermen here served to showcase a rather narrow anthropocentric approach to marine pollution that does not allow wider societal implications to be identified. Is it really only the fishermen that are to blame for that? It's much bigger, much more complex. Don't let go of that balloon. It ends up in the sea. Here we have another message that seems to urge the audience to become more responsible when it comes to activities that are relevant to their contexts. So, for instance, alerting children to be mindful next time they hold a balloon. So we see how these messages are being with this kind of statements, how the language and the ideas that are communicated to the children have all sorts of meanings in different levels. A dolphin entangled, tell them. Here it is the quote. I remember. I cannot read it because of all the stuff, as I said before, but I remember the dolphin says to Ella to tell people to pick up everything they drop. So here, on top of being the warrior and the guardian of the sea, now Ella assumes the role of the messenger. She is in between the adults and the sea creatures that trust her ability and willingness to help and save their home. Again, Ella, the character, seems to be on top and above of the sea creatures and of the pollution. Is somewhere in the middle, somewhere neutral, somewhere where we have the 2 extreme situations, and then Ella needs to help to act both ways. Towards the end of the story, at the end of the story, Ella is thinking how else she can continue her fight, and she asks who's in charge. And the images in the story show Ella in the middle of a busy scene where adults film and record her effort and her fight with the slogan on reduce, reuse, recycle. again, a very commonplace, a very well popularized message about recycling and about reduce, reuse, the three R's. So it becomes clear that Ella's character has changed. She started as a child with an inquisitive mind and turned into an empowered, knowledgeable child that initiated and won a fight against plastic and marine pollution, and so became the guardian of the seas. And her agency is gradually assumed due to the problems she perceives, and her world in the story affords her the right to fight once she has become involved. Now that's also interesting, and again here you can see the parallel we can draw with Greta Thunberg, for instance, and how the more she participated, the more she engaged, the more space the world afforded her to voice her concerns. There were some other humans in the story. It's a scientist, a few other adults, and a few other children, for which the role was quite secondary. I'm not going to say much about this. I'm going to move to the personified sea creatures. So we have sea creatures. There are two crabs, an octopus, a turtle, and a dolphin, and their role in the story help promote Ella's agency. They are positioned in the victim's role. Again, they are different to Ella. Ella is the one that it is happy, that she's all about the questions, that she's all energetic, that she's doing something about it, as opposed to the sea creatures who have assumed the role of the victim, because they are the ones that suffer the consequences of the plastic rubbish that end up in the ocean. Interestingly enough, again, these sea creatures that are presented as victims do not seem to be angry. They're just sad. So another reason why humans need to take action to protect the environment and save other creatures. So again, Ella is different to this. They suffer, she does not. But is she really different? Is she not part? Shouldn't be seen that she's also part of the same context. From a narrative perspective analysis, on top of Ella being positioned as the guardian of the sea, she's also positioned as their savior now. So both these roles describe how the world sees Ella and how Ella sees herself into this world. She sees herself as the environmental guardian that needs to protect the oceans and the sea creatures from plastic, and even from adults who seem to be passive towards the environmental problems the world faces. That's another thing that I know I didn't talk about the scientists and the other adults, but Ella is also presented as different to the adults. She's the one that is active as opposed to the passive other adults. So what kind of environmental identity that storybook promotes? According to the narrative analytic approach and to the bi-directional approach of the agency passivity, it is safe to argue that we see a passive, ignorant individual, child, who starts realizing what happens to the oceans, and gradually the narrator imposes on her character the way the world wants to see her and acquiring agency. So there is a development from passivity and ignorance to agency and knowledge. So the main character has transformed from the everyday child that watches TV, because this is at the very beginning, Ella is watching TV and she's asking the question, what's that stuff? Where she gets the answers, it's the horrible plastic and all that. So from the everyday child that watches TV to a fighter and guardian that promotes and protects the oceans. So the child has changed and is not the same anymore. And this transformation shows as well in the way the story portrays the main character is different to adults as well when it comes to action, when it comes to finding solutions to environmental problems and being accepted by its peers, who happily follow her suggestions. Can a storybook be considered as a formative experience in relation to the environment? I would argue that a storybook can be considered as a proxy. Young children can identify with the characters of the story, and they can empathize with animals who need help and support. I mean, story as a pedagogic tool, it's very strong for effective teaching and learning in any area. So the same can be argued for the environment. Friston and O'Toole support the idea that children can learn from indirect experiences. And they have, with their research, they showed that the stronger the reader's emotional involvement, the stronger was the reader's emotional involvement in stories, the stronger was their links to the characters, the plot, and they were able to remember better the information they received. So the use of a storybook with an environmental theme can become a formative experience as long as children are offered opportunities to further delve into the issues and information presented. And comparing these to an experience in nature, the difference is the lack of the emotional links that can be developed easily when someone is experiencing nature directly rather than experiencing it by proxy. So the children's fiction can help towards developing pupils' knowledge and interest around environmental issues. We need to understand better, though, how language is used and practice as well in children's, and the use of praxis in children's fiction can help us promote much wider environmental issues that touch upon justice issues as well. So
thank you so much. We'll get to the questions in a minute. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I suggest we move to a quick Q&A. I know some people are going to leave before the breakout.
Okay. So I'll stop sharing then.
Yes, please. And then we'll get to the questions when we move to the small groups. So it's 9:51. Let's take 5-8 minutes for Q&A before we move to the breakout rooms. I think I saw something from Andy. Maybe he left already. Okay, I'll share with you his comments and questions later. Any other questions from people or comments? Yes, Vikash.
Yeah, so thank you very much. This is a wonderful presentation, and I joined might be a late, but just I was curious about the stories and the character you have prepared, and like it is very powerful character, and I saw like it's much emphasized on the everyday whatever we use as a plastic or anything in the day-to-day life. The second thing I'm like, as the example you used as a toothpaste. So I was thinking like, what will be the option for the toothpaste or the toothbrush particularly? If not the toothbrush in a plastic form, then should the child use the wood toothpaste, or what else the child will use? So if you ask me from the Indian context, if you go to the India in the villages, you will see the children, the parents, and everyone use the natural resources. The tree's wood, which is already be there. So they used to go in the morning and just pick up the so neem. So I don't know the English word for the neem. So neem is a tree where you can just take that tree's wood and you can just do your brushing. So you don't have to buy the plastic toothbrush or any other toothbrush. So that will, I feel like, so as you said, the reduce, rescue, and recycle. So in the reduce, if we reduce that with the natural resources which are already available, And another thing, I will feel like it is much emphasized on our own practices instead of focusing on the prepare who produce these products, plastics and other stuff. So why they are producing? Because we are consuming. So government, if should create some kind of policy, or in the story, if we make one liner or something like, who are these producers? They are producing it, and that's why we are consumer of it, right? So if we think in that line, I feel like it will be a great contribution in the children's story, because we are giving the stories fits in their mind in that early childhood. So we should be like very cautious about like what options we are giving to them. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to respond quickly, or should we take more comments?
My sound was not very good, and I missed parts of what Vika said. But I think the point you made towards the end, if I'm not mistaken, about the story giving the opportunities for all sorts of different issues to be discussed and to be explored in one way, using their experiences from, you know, whether they live in India or they live in London or they live in whichever other country, can help them see the issues in its sort of real context. So it's not just dropping the plastic altogether. Yes, plastic is harmful. Can we drop it altogether? That would be difficult. So exploring the issues around that, how it can be done, to which degree it can be done. The same with the fishermen. Is it only the fishermen to be blamed for what's happening in the oceans? No, it's much bigger. And yes, in one storybook, you may not be able to have all these issues explored. Or, as you know, I mentioned in the presentation, there are scholars who think that books with environmental issues are rather simplified and depoliticized. So I guess you can see this notion of praxis as an opportunity to politicize in a positive way all these issues which are political. I mean, there's no denying about that.
Wonderful. Let's take one or two quick comments, okay, before we go to the breakout rooms. One or two quick comments.
Just a quick comment for me. That was really interesting, Athanasiou. Thank you. Just in my country, the UK, that the government says that the government has banned teachers from teaching anything that could be deemed political. And so it's a massive challenge, because a lot of the climate change struggle involves political work. We probably don't have time for any of your thoughts, but if you had a super quick thought on how we could start to shift that, I'd love to hear it.
Gareth, I'm also in the UK, even though my name and my pronunciation does not say so. I know exactly what you're talking about. In the latest policy document on climate education, there are 3 lines that actually say, pretty much they say, and do not worry, you teachers, do not worry. There's nothing political about that. Just make sure you give all the different opinions. It was given in such a unproblematic manner that I was reading it, and I was thinking to myself, you know, there is huge research tradition, many researchers who have talked about how difficult it is for teachers to touch upon some aspects of these environmental issues, exactly because they touch upon political issues in the sense that have to do with the industry in an area. Again, you cannot just say, you know, we stop all factories because they pollute, when they give jobs to the, you know, to the parents of the pupils that you have in class. I think it's I think this is not something that will be solved from top to bottom. I think it's more like from bottom up. And this is why the notion of environmental identity, the notion of helping people relate in a conscious matter to how they think about themselves in the environment, the natural and social, is really important, because it can make a difference when it comes to teaching. So you may have a textbook that says that, you know, we pollute the the oceans are polluted by plastic, and you can just reiterate that, they will learn it, they will know it, and that will be it. But in order for that to be transformed into something that can have an impact upon their lives, children's lives, and the societies that we live, I think it needs to be, it needs to touch chords that are quite, personal, so to speak. So I don't have an answer to the question you just asked.
That was helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so I suggest we move to Daphne, two small discussion rooms. And maybe we can share the questions again. Not again. Do you want to share the screens on the questions?
Yes, let me share this. Let me share the oops. So some of the questions, as I said, scholars argued that children's books about the environment tend to be oversimplified and depoliticized. So how can we overcome such oversimplifications? And I'm sure, talking to in the audience many teachers, I'm sure you found yourselves in such situations. So if you can recall some examples. Op de Beck as well has put forward some really interesting questions. For instance, does the division between the lived experience and the abstract, verbal, or visual representation interrupt the ability to share genuinely eco-critical ideas? So is it only our experiences or the stories, abstract, verbal, visual representations cannot help us genuinely address eco-critical ideas? And it could be a story, it could be an image, it could be images within the story. How can a combination of experiential learning and print or written media communicate complex eco-critical values to young people? So the experiential learning, the experiences that children have in nature, how they can be used in class in order to help them develop thinking around eco-critical environmental values. And finally, how much do we need to be mindful of the language we use, the language the stories use to communicate models for pupils to imitate? For instance, the word fighter, the word warrior, the word guardian, these are quite strong words. Should we be mindful of the kind of words we use? So these are the questions.
Okay, I'll share them in the chat as well. I'm going to start the groups because we're running out of time. Let's take 18 minutes for small group discussions and come back. Is that okay with everybody?
Mm-hmm. Okay,
so introduce yourself, be efficient. We'll see you back in 18 minutes.
We talked about how I saw, I start talking about how I saw climate education, which is to incite love for nature, that you have to first care and love for your environment, the plants around you, the bugs around you, know the animals around you, know their names, feel them, spend a day with them, so children can care for the environment. And we should be very careful about them saving the world because they're just children, right? They should be the lovers of nature. They should be maybe the protectors of nature, maybe the guardians of nature, but never, the savior of nature that creates stress for them. So that was my 2 cents about it. But everybody talked.
Others?
Hello, if you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to add something. I'm from Albania, and I have been working with children also in the University of Korça with teachers that will become in elementary schools, will work in elementary schools. And it was interesting history, Athanasia, and I congratulate you. I wanted to add something about the words you mentioned before. If we can simplify in the environmental discussion these words, or environmental issues are simplified in books like these. It is a discussion, but I think that it is good to discuss at all, because sometimes we do not at all, let's say in some countries or in some schools, but let has in mind that kids, school kids will become adults, and so they need education. So we maybe some teachers are afraid to discuss about the political issues or industry. Anyway, we can go through education to them. If we educate kids how to behave, or how to have an attitude in front of the plastic, we can win, let's say, this battle. The warrior or guardian you could be also when you are a smart customer, because all of them will be customers in the future. And if the industry is going to produce those kind of things and items, we can educate people not to buy them. So it is a kind, let's say, another point of view. So if many teachers don't want to confront or don't want to go to the political discussion, we can we can win the battle through the education, I think. And this was interesting. This book and the issues, or the way they come to the children, they understand what is happening, but also we have to find something what they can do. Okay, it is good to know what they can do as kids, because they cannot change much the world, but they become adults, and they can do from their point of view many things. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Adriana. Any other comments or thoughts? I have one. So as you were talking in the early slides of the presentation, you were talking about the importance of positionality as a way to construct identity, which is very in line with social psychology or sociological psychology. And I was wondering whether you thought about analyzing the different characters in the book as a type of a network conversing between them and really constructing this character of Ella. For example, how it seems like from the quotes, some of the quotes had information about the context, who is saying them, some of them didn't, but when she was told to be brave, for example, who is the character that is telling her to be brave? Is it the narrator? Is it one of the characters in the book? Is it an adult or an animal? I think this kind of interactions between the different figures in the textbook are really interesting to study as a network, because then you can see whether the networks change throughout the book.
Yeah, I think yeah, you're right. It's the narrator that says, you need to be brave, and obviously it's the narrator is how the how the world wants to see you, and then the characters like the crabs, the dolphin that are in the tell here, save us effectively, which highlights how different they are to Ella. They are the miserable, the sad, not angry, just sad, while the narrator has the gives all this encouraging, empowering sort of talk. But mostly it's from the narrator. There are a few instances. It's a short story. It's not a big story, and it's but I see the point that you're saying here, how that would I think that would further highlight how different or similar, in the book, the characters are, and how they develop. So the Ella develops from passive to very active, and then the sea creatures just express their misery and their sadness, and that's it. So they are shown very helpless, effectively, which they are.
Which is super interesting for the discussion of identities, of putting nature on the receiving end, while I think the research suggests that nature will be okay. It's humans that are not going to survive this. Nature will be okay, bugs or Jukim, what's the name? What's the name of the...
Cockroach.
Yeah, cockroach, thank you. Barak called them big ants. So this cockroaches, they are going to survive us thousands of years to the future. So that's this really interesting presentation of passivity on the nature side, and still reinforcing the dominance of humans.
Of the human, yeah.
So there's so much to unpack in this, but think about the network. If you want to do it, I'm more than happy to share ideas. But I'm sharing with you a link, everybody, to a cool website that took all the big movies and looked at the network of the characters in the movies. And you can see how different genres of movies have different network structures. But something like this with this book would be very interesting, I believe. And then to compare it with the book on Greta and the Giants, I think that's the name of the book. That will be very, very interesting, just to compare the structures.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I took more than I planned to. Neta or anyone else want to say something before we wrap up? Neta or Daphna?
I was excited to see that someone else is working with literature and environmental education, and I shared my my point of view of how art, literature, cinema are all parts of like important parts of my way of looking at environmental education, combined with just being in nature. So thank you, Athanasia.
It was my first attempt, and I enjoyed it, I have to say.
Well, that's
I
good.
I just want to comment related to what Vikas you said before. I think we should discuss the social justice when we are talking about these books much more, and not just taking it as for granted that all of us using plastic, and all of us, it's not all of us, and this is also a hidden curriculum or hidden parts in the book that maybe could be covered up. What a child in India will get from this book, or what a child in the developed countries, and it's not obvious.
No, but that's the beauty of what Neta said earlier as well in our group, that when you use a story or art, narrative, image, whatever, you will have genuine questions emanating from the learners. And of course, the questions will be different in an Indian context to an English, to America, to Brazil, to wherever, because of the different context. So, and that's why you cannot have a textbook that says that's how you do it. That's how you do environmental education. That's how you, I think that's a strength and a weakness at the same time. A strength because it can open up so many opportunities to touch upon difficult issues like the social justice stuff you just mentioned, Daphne, and a weakness because it can be intimidating for teachers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, any last comments? If not, thank you so much for a wonderful first presentation of our workshop.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to see everybody next month. We'll send you the date. I think it's going to be October 19. We'll send you more information.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
So much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.